and it gives me great pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. And you'll meet him in person here in just a minute, Matt Reidy. He's a wildlife biology from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. He's going to give us kind of an overview of birds of prey. As he puts it, some biology, some ecology, and maybe a few ID tips. And as you can see, he's all decked out over here in the picture. He is a master falconer, a lifelong bird aficionado, and an avid hunter. And he combines all of those things. He has a bachelor's degree in wildlife ecology and management from Texas A&M and a master's degree in range and wildlife science from Texas A&M Kingsville. You might say he's an A&M guy. He has been with Texas Parks and Wildlife for 13 years. He covers Atascosa, Bexar, and Medina counties, so he's in our region too. His talk tonight is approved for Alamo Area Master Naturalist, and we are recording it. I have started the recording. If you would like to have a link to that recording, we will be posting it on the Bexar Audubon Society website. Before we get started, it's going to be coming in here. So he's going to tell you why he's so in love with raptors. He's going to tell you what raptors he uses in falconry and which raptors you might be able to see in your own neighborhood, just like our friend that took a picture in her backyard. And he may even tell you his favorite raptor. So I'm going to stop my share, and I'm going to ask Matt to share his screen.
Right.
There he is.
All right. I hope everybody can see that. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Patsy. Is that all? Is that looking good, Patsy?
I'm scrolling through trying to find it. Yes, it's perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, excellent. As Patsy said, my name is Matt Reidy. I'm a wildlife biologist with Texas Parks and Wildlife. I've been with the department about 13 years, but I've been very interested in nature and wildlife probably for as long as I can remember. I get to ask that question a lot, like what got me interested in birds of prey, what got me interested in being a wildlife biologist. And I think I can kind of trace it back for my entire life. I remember going to the circus when I was a little kid and wanting to be a lion tamer. I can remember finding turtles in the creek behind my house when I lived in Houston when I was a little bitty kid and wanting to be a herpetologist. And then getting into dinosaurs like most little kids do until Jurassic Park came out. And I was young when Jurassic Park came out, and that made me kind of scared of dinosaurs. So no more dinosaurs for me. And then raptors, birds of prey, really took my attention. And I'll tell you how it started. I find it's really important for children to get a chance to learn about different things about nature, because for me, it was first grade that got me interested in birds of prey. I was in a little Catholic school in Temple, Texas, and a guy came to my school and he had a slideshow presentation on peregrine falcons, and he was following them on migration from the Arctic Circle all the way down to Central and South America by airplane. And I was hooked. It was amazing to me to see this amazing bird, the fastest animal in the world, and all the pictures he had, and just got me really excited. I remember drawing pictures of falcons and hawks and eagles as a little kid. This was first grade, mind you. And then I remember running home, and we didn't have internet at that time, but we had encyclopedias, and my dad had a great set of encyclopedias at the house. And I remember running over to the F and flipping the pages and looking up falcon. And then right next to that, I saw the word falconry, and I said, what? And I can remember to this day, I can still see that in my mind from when I was in first grade, of this picture of a peregrine falcon sitting on a guy's fist. And then the next page, a picture of a gyr-falcon sitting on a guy's fist. And I was just enthralled. So all the way since first grade, I've had an interest in birds of prey. So that's been kind of my driver of my, I guess I would say personally, what I really enjoy is birds. I've always enjoyed birds. Professionally, I haven't done a whole lot of bird work professionally. My master's degree was actually on feral hogs. And then I did some internships before that on Olympic marmots. What I kind of learned was, when you want to get into the wildlife field, you kind of get you go where the jobs are. And so that's what I did, was I went where the jobs were with birds, and birds of prey always in the back of my mind as a passion, but realizing that wildlife, all wildlife and wildlife habitat has become even more of a passion for me. So before I go any more forward, if you have any questions as I go through this presentation, please put them in the chat, and I will happily try to answer them as we get through. But let's talk about birds of prey. I noticed when people came on that there's quite a few people that are not from Bexar County. So I apologize that I focused this presentation on Bexar County alone, but I'm happy to talk about other counties or other parts of the state as much as I can, and give you the whatever information that I can give you. So let's just get right into the meat of it. So really I wanted to start kind of small. What is a bird of prey? A bird of prey is a bird that is carnivorous. They usually have strong grasping feet and sharp talons for capturing prey. They have excellent vision. And we have about 40 plus different species of raptor or bird of prey in Texas. Lots of different species doing lots of different things. So some of the common birds that we might see in Bexar County include the group called falcons. Falcons have long pointed wings, long bird catching toes, and they're high speed aerial predators. Generally spend a lot of time in the air. They have those swept back wings. The peregrine falcon, known as the fastest animal in the world, and several other species that they eat other birds primarily, as well as a few other things, but they're aerial high speed predators. In Bexar County and the surrounding area, there's generally 4 species that you might see, of falcon that you might see in the area. American kestrel is pretty ubiquitous. In our part of Texas, in South Texas, Bexar County, for example, they generally don't nest here, but the American kestrel will be found in the winter. At my house, I live in Atascosa County, northern Atascosa County. I generally see them about September 12 to 19 is about when I start to see kestrels showing up where I live. You go farther north, you're going to find American kestrels nesting. I say that now with some information, and some of y'all might have better information than I do, of there might be some kestrels that are starting to nest farther south as we go along. Let's move on to the peregrine falcon. The peregrine falcon is another one of those species that most likely doesn't nest in our part of the country, but they do migrate through. There's the tundra peregrine, which nests in the Arctic Circle and then migrates through our part of Texas all the way to Central and South America. Then we also have the merlin, which really neat bird. These guys also nest farther north, but will migrate through Central and South Texas. Really neat bird, pretty small, sometimes misidentified quite a bit, but they are a very, very strong aerial predator. Generally, if you see a merlin, it's generally sitting still on a perch somewhere, probably by about 9 o'clock in the morning, because it's already fed that morning. They are very, very adept hunters for sure. And then finally, the prairie falcon. Prairie falcons are generally found in the middle U.S., Intermountain West. You'd be surprised, some of you, if you're avid birders, you may not see them very often, but I generally see a prairie falcon in our part of Texas almost every winter. There'll be a prairie falcon that makes it down this far south. Generally, you'll see them farther north in the panhandle of Texas and places like that. So let's give some identification tips. I talked about the merlin and the American kestrel. These are 2 species that can be pretty hard to identify in the field for a lot of people. The American kestrel is very ubiquitous in the winter. We will see a lot of them sitting on power lines, sitting on fence posts. They're pretty identifiable with that flicking of their tail, the hovering action that they make, things like that. But it's sometimes, if you want to I see a merlin and you're looking for them, trying to find them. If you're not used to looking for merlins or seeing what they look like, you might misidentify a kestrel and hope it might be a merlin. I know I catch this myself pretty often. I see this little falcon go flying across the road and I'm go, merlin, oh, dang it, kestrel. But I want to give you some of the simplest ways to tell a kestrel from a merlin. Talking to a good friend of mine that flies a lot of merlins, what he uses is American kestrels have elbows. What I mean by that is this picture kind of gives you a good, the two pictures in this slide give you a good idea. So the kestrel looks like he has pointy elbows pointing forward as he's flying. So the elbows would be the middle of that wing. Whereas the merlin looks like it has more of a flat wing with no elbow on it. So I see on the chat making kestrels of the merlins is called wishful birding. But the biggest thing is look for that that elbow. If you see that elbow, that kind of pointy part of the elbow of their wing, that's telling you that's a kestrel right away. And so you won't be as wishful. You'll go, yep, kestrel, got it. Whereas that merlin has more of that a little bit broader wing and less of that point at that elbow part. Also, merlins generally do not hover. I personally haven't seen merlins hovering much at all. So if a bird hovers, you immediately know that's in the sky. You immediately know that's going to be a kestrel. And finally, merlins have a more direct flight. My experience with merlins is that I will see just this small rocket scream across the sky in a direct flight, pumping along all the way. And generally going far distances, and you see a lot of small birds like starlings go exploding all over the place as the merlin screamed through them. Whereas the American kestrel's got more of a butterfly style flight, not as long and direct. Those are the kind of your ways to tell that merlin from the kestrel. And keep your eyes out around Bexar County. You're in some of the more open rural parts of Bexar County. I would not be surprised at all if you'd see a merlin during the winter.
Matt, we've had a request. Would you
point to the picture? Yes, ma'am.
Would you point to the picture and say which one is which, so people will be sure they understand which one they're looking
at? Got
it.
Okay. So the merlin, good. I apologize for that. The merlin is the one on the top, whereas the kestrel is the one on the bottom. And as you can see, the one on the bottom has the elbows, whereas the one on the top, you don't see much of an elbow as far as poking out, like the bony elbow. When you think of a skinny person with a bony elbow, that's kind of how you look at that kestrel, with that elbow of the wrist of their wing. I like to call them elbows, but the wrist of their wing kind of pointing forward as they're flying. That's that difference. So the bottom picture is the kestrel, the top picture is the merlin. All right, on falcons, let's talk about the peregrine falcon versus the prairie falcon. That one is also another one that can be difficult to distinguish. And one of the things that I put on here is if you look at the picture in your top left, that is a very light-headed bird. Someone might consider that, what is that? Is that a weird falcon? Maybe it's a prairie falcon. I don't know. That's actually a peregrine falcon. That's a juvenile male peregrine falcon. Whereas an adult female is the picture below that with that really dark cap. And then in the center is another peregrine falcon, another juvenile peregrine falcon. And then on the right, on the bottom right, and the middle right is a prairie falcon. So, and then the top right picture is another juvenile peregrine falcon. So bottom line, the peregrine is going to be dark, either a dark bluish or black look, whereas the prairie falcon is going to be more of a tan or a brown look. And that with the prairie falcon, they have those dark armpits. So you're going to see like the dark armpit with the lighter wings and the lighter chest. That'll tell you that's a prairie falcon. Whereas the peregrine is going to have the entire part of the wing will be dark instead of just the armpit part. And then a final thing that, let's see if I'm missing any chat questions. A final thing that I use for prairie falcons is when prairie falcons flap, they're going to use the end of their wings, like they're just flapping with their wrists. Whereas when a peregrine's flapping, they're flapping with their entire wing. Okay, so if you see that kind of just the wrist action going as they're flapping across the sky, that's most likely a prairie falcon, whereas a peregrine is going to have much more of a deeper wing beat as they're flying across the sky. I've been able to use that pretty often at long distances. When I'm up in the panhandle of Texas where there's, you can see a long ways, you can see that flapping action of that prairie falcon a long ways off, across a section, things like that. So that flapping with the wrist is what I'm going to use to identify that prairie falcon versus the peregrine falcon. So some of our other birds of prey that we'll have around Bexar County, hawks, and we break hawks up into primarily two groups, buteos and accipiters. First, I'll talk about the buteos. The buteos have long, broad wings, heavy, powerful feet, and they usually choose a conspicuous perch. We have a lot of buteo species that use our part of Texas. One that most people know is the red-tailed hawk. But then also, if you're in San Antonio, you've probably, and you pay attention to birds, you've probably seen red-shouldered hawks around the area. The red-tailed hawk obviously has a red tail. The red-shouldered hawk has a red shoulder. However, the juveniles of these species don't have those telltale markers. So there might be other things you'll need to use. Swainson's hawks will be migrating through here in large numbers in the fall and the spring. A lot of times people will talk about seeing dozens, if not 30 or 40 hawks sitting on the ground in the fall and some just previously mowed pastures, and wonder what those are. And usually those are Swainson's hawks. Then we also have broad-winged hawks, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, but we've had some broad-winged hawks nesting in and around Bexar County, and have become kind of a question or a concern. I've seen white-tailed hawks come up into Bexar County at times, generally after a prescribed fire or a wildfire. Well, white-tailed hawks seem to be really driven by following fires. And I kind of find it neat. The ferruginous hawk is a species that has generally been found in the panhandle of Texas and also the Intermountain West. I've been living in Lytle about 11 years now, and I live in deep sandy country in the Post Oak Savannah. And I remember seeing my first ferruginous hawk come into this area in the late winter, and I was really blown away. Why is a ferruginous hawk this far south? Well, we have a lot of gophers, and we have a lot of kangaroo rats, and we have a lot of critters that live in the sand, and these guys are very focused. The ferruginous hawk is very focused on these gophers and things like that. So that's why they're coming down here. If you're paying attention, I've skipped a bird, the Harris's hawk. Why did I skip it? Because it's not really a buteo. It's actually a parabuteo. It's in its own little grouping there. The Harris's hawk is a really, really neat bird. Very interesting, very different in many ways from other buteos, but they're found only in South Texas and the southern U.S. primarily. Very, very neat bird. They hunt in groups. Very beautiful with the white tip tail and the white rump, as well as those reddish shoulders, kind of like a red-shouldered hawk, and that dark chocolate color. If you go south of San Antonio into some of the brush country, you will run into red-shouldered or Harris's hawks quite often. So identification tips when it comes to buteos. First off, it is a red-tailed hawk unless you can prove otherwise. That's probably the best thing I can tell you. If you see a large buteo, first think red-tailed hawk, and then let it tell you whether it is one or not. I generally catch myself with that wishful birding, hoping that I saw something different, because there's usually a lot of red-tailed hawks around. But that would be the best I can give you. If it's really assume red-tailed hawk until you kind of get really looking at it and use these other identifying factors to determine what it is. Juvenile red-tailed hawks will not have a red tail. Those can trick people quite often. They'll see a large buteo and wonder what it is, and it's a juvenile red-tailed hawk. So if it's shaped like a red-tailed hawk and it acts like a red-tailed hawk, even though it doesn't have a red tail, it could still be a red-tailed hawk. If you're confident it's not a red-tailed hawk, so what else could it be? So what I use for my identification is, first off, I think of what time of year is it. If it's spring or summer, that's going to narrow down my species. If it's winter, that's going to broaden some things here. And then I go into what type of habitat is it in or nearby. What I mean by that is, one of my favorite is, if I hear or see a red-shouldered hawk, I know there's water nearby. Red-shouldered hawks are always near water. So if you're near a water feature, be it a creek, a pond, a drainage ditch, a swamp, what have you, those red-shouldered hawks are going to be nearby that. And so I actually use that when I'm visiting with landowners or spending time out in any place I'm at. If I hear or see a red-shouldered hawk, I know there's water nearby. I don't know if that would help me if I was ever lost in the woods, but maybe it would. And then also, what is it doing? Is that bird sitting on a big conspicuous perch? like a tree or a telephone pole, or is it on the ground? Is it what is it doing exactly? Is it deep in the woods, kind of hidden from view, or is it real conspicuous? Those can help you narrow those things down. If it's big and conspicuous, it's probably a red-tailed hawk. If it's kind of deep in the woods, it could be a red-shouldered hawk or a broad-winged hawk or something like that. So using the context clues can help you narrow down whether that's a red-tailed hawk, just a juvenile red-tailed hawk with a brown tail, or maybe it is actually a red-shouldered hawk or a broad-winged hawk or something like that. Oops.
Excuse me, Matt, would you
Sure.
identify the two birds that are in the picture on the slide?
Yeah, those are the one on the right is definitely a red-tailed hawk. The one on the left is a red-shouldered hawk.
Thank you.
Yep. So next group of birds are called accipiters. Accipiters are they have short, rounded wings, very long tails, long bird-catching toes, and they're primarily ambush predators. Accipiters are those birds that flash through your bird feeders and generally scare everything off. They are the sprinters of the raptor world. They're in the brush. Identifying and that it's an accipiter from a distance can be pretty easy. They will flap 3 times and then glide when they're flying across the sky. So flap, 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 glide, flap, 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 glide over and over again. And then their tails look so long, it's almost comical how long their tails are compared to their body. So those are accipiters. These are these bird catching hawks, the sprinters. I see I had a question on here. Someone asked about red-tailed hawks. Do they always have that speckled band and a U across the chest? Red-tailed hawks, let me go back to red-tailed hawks for a second. Red-tailed hawks are extremely variable in their plumage. A lot of them will have the belly band, but a lot of them won't. I have seen red-tailed hawks that were almost all black. I've seen red-tailed hawks that were almost all white. And every different color in between. So for a red-tailed hawk, it's very difficult to use just color of be it a belly band or what have you, to identify that bird. Obviously, if it has a red tail, then it's a red-tailed hawk, an adult. But the red-tailed hawk is so variable in their plumage and their coloration across the country, and even in parts of Texas, that you can't use any specifics like a belly band to know for sure if that's a red-tailed hawk. All right, let's get back to the accipiters. Hey, no problem with going backwards. I'm happy to answer questions as we think about them. I think it's better to get on it while we're there versus trying to go back in the end, but we'll do what we can. So going back to the accipiters, in our part of Texas, we generally have 2 species that you might see in Bexar County. One is the Cooper's hawk. The other one is the sharp-shinned hawk. And these guys can be very difficult to tell the difference between the two. And I will do my best to try to help you identify what you're seeing in the field here around Bexar County. These guys, there is a third accipiter species in North America, the goshawk, which is much larger, but we're not going to see, most likely we're not going to see one in our part of Texas. I have actually never seen one in the wild personally. I've seen some very large Cooper's hawks that people wanted to call goshawks, but I haven't seen one in the wild because I've spent most of my time down here in South Texas. So Cooper's hawk and sharp-shinned hawk is primarily what we're talking about. Let's see here. So identification tips here in Bexar County, just like the red-tailed hawk, if it is a Cooper's hawk, unless you prove otherwise. That's the best thing I can tell you here in our part of the state. I get this quite often. People will see an accipiter and they'll want to call it a sharp-shinned hawk, but the Cooper's hawk is very ubiquitous in our part of Texas in the fall and winter. If you see an accipiter, it's going to be a Cooper's hawk 99% of the time. And they also, I have found one nest myself here in Bexar County, but I'm sure there's quite a few more Cooper's hawk nests in Bexar County. And then if you go to Austin or even Dallas, Fort Worth, there's many, many, many Cooper's hawk nests in Bexar County or in Texas. So I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with more and more of those over time. So bottom line, if you see an accipiter, it is a Cooper's hawk unless you can prove otherwise. And what are you going to use in a quick way? What are you going to use to tell if that might truly be a sharp-shinned hawk? Because I have seen sharp-shinned hawks in our part of Texas in the fall and the winter, but most of the time it's going to be a Cooper's hawk. So what are you going to use if you think it might be a sharp-shin? First time, what time of year is it? If it's fall or winter, okay, it could be a sharp-shin. Another thing, quick thing to use, what type of prey is it chasing? If it's chasing white-winged dove or grackles or any bird like that, that's going to be a Cooper's hawk. A sharp-shinned hawk is generally too small to easily capture a grackle or a white-winged dove or a pigeon or something like that. So if it's chasing big stuff like that, it is a Cooper's hawk. If it's chasing house sparrows, now it could potentially be a sharp-shinned hawk. They can still be pretty difficult to ID. The Cooper's hawk has a rounded tail. The sharp-shinned hawk has a square tail. And then especially in the juvenile birds, they're both going to be brown, and they're going to have the other thing I can tell you is the Cooper's hawk has more of kind of a sticking out bulbous head. Whereas it's got shoulders and then the head, whereas the sharp-shinned hawk has this almost like it has no neck. Like it looks like a bird with no neck as far as accipiters go. So for me personally, I'm looking at what prey it's chasing. If it's chasing little grassland birds and it looks tiny, then I'm thinking Cooper's hawk. A sharp-shinned hawk. If it's chasing pigeons, that's a Cooper's hawk.
And we have a question
in
here.
this picture, these three pictures. Sure.
Question, are Cooper hawk here all year round?
They can be. Like I said, I found nests here in Bexar County. I think it was Hardburger Park where I found a nest. I saw that on a birding chat, and I went and checked it out, and it was a Cooper's hawk nest. So they can be here year round. And then I see another question about red-shouldered hawks and Cooper's hawks. I'm glad you brought that up because that's on my next slide. So before I go to that, on your left and your right, actually, I think all three of these are Cooper's hawks of these pictures here. Again, that kind of big longer neck thing as far as the Cooper's hawk goes. Like I said, it's most things you're going to see are Cooper's hawks. So let's talk about that, identifying them. I have three birds up here right now. These three can be misidentified or be confused quite often, and I'll tell you what I use to try to separate them. In your top left is a juvenile Cooper's hawk, okay? In your bottom left is a juvenile red-shouldered hawk. On your right is a juvenile sharp-shinned hawk. So again, most of what you're going to see is a Cooper's hawk. But a lot of times people will see a juvenile red-shouldered hawk and misidentify that as a juvenile Cooper's. What am I going to use to tell the difference? One, tail length. The red-shouldered hawk has a much shorter tail than that Cooper's hawk. Cooper's hawk tails are very, very long. So it almost looks comical how long their tails are. So that's the first thing I use. The other thing that I use is toes. Red-shouldered hawks have short, fat, strong, rodent-grabbing toes, whereas Cooper's hawks have these very, again, almost comical, long, thin, bird-catching toes. So those are the two things that I'm going to use right away is tail length and toe size. If they're short and they look strong and beefy, that's going to be a red-shouldered hawk. If they're long and thin, like they're, I don't know, like a real thin, long toes, that's going to be Cooper's hawk. That's how I tell the difference. And then the sharp-shinned hawk on the other side is, again, very small, but has that really big head, like almost with no neck, and they're going to have that square tail. So if you see a brown bird like these two on the left, think of that tail length and think of that toe size to really tell you the difference. And generally, you can pick that out pretty quickly. If you've seen enough Cooper's hawks, that long tail sticks out like you wouldn't believe. All right. Other common birds of prey seen in Bexar County are owls. We have several owls in our part of the state. Of course, they're nocturnal. They have large eyes, very broad wings, and a very silent flight. The owls are very neat critters. I will be first to tell you that I am not a night person, so I'm not a big owl fan. I'd much rather be up during the day, but they are pretty neat critters, and they do a really neat service as far as taking care of rodents and things like that in our areas. We have great horned owls, barred owls, barn owls, and eastern screech owls. In San Antonio, I know there's been some owl prowls where people go out at night and they can play calls of different owls, and you'll be able to actually get those owls to come up. And that's a really neat way to identify the owls. You can hear their calls and you'll be able to identify them pretty quickly. But those guys, again, they're out mostly at night, and the best thing to do is to listen for the different sounds they make to tell whether they're there. I definitely hear the stories of people hearing some pretty scary things at night. And what's funny is a lot of times the call of a eastern screech owl it can be pretty scary at night because it can sound almost like a screaming woman, and it comes from a little bitty owl. So pretty interesting. We do have two vulture species in Bexar County, the black vulture and the turkey vulture. I'm sure if you're looking for birds and you're looking in the sky, you've probably seen both of these species pretty often. They're generally, the turkey vulture for sure is soaring quite often in the sky. They're the ones that you're going to see with that slight dihedral to their wings. They're going to have that red head, and they're black with the all of their primaries and secondaries, kind of that lighter color, almost translucent through as they're flying. So that dihedral, and they seem to have an easy time soaring in the air. Whereas the black vulture, on the other hand, has a black head. They kind of much stubbier wings and a stubbier tail, and they actually have the light part going on the wider part or lighter part of their wing on the outside of their wing. I see we have some more chat. What do we have here? Dihedral, great question there. Dihedral is when they actually hold their wings up in a V. So when they're facing directly at them, and if you could face directly at them, their wings are held up above their body. Whereas a black vulture their wings are basically directly in line with their body horizontally. So that's what I mean by a dihedral. As you watch turkey vultures flying, you'll get to see that as they kind of soar along in updrafts and in windy days like that, when they soar really low, you can see how they kind of hold their wings up above the plane of their body. Let's see. There's lots of other birds of prey that can be found in and around Bexar County. First, talking about eagles, we have I've heard through the grapevine of at least one bald eagle nest in probably on the edges of Bexar County around the San Antonio River. I don't know if that's still there or not. I think it was on private property, but there have been eagles that have nested outside of Bexar County or outside of San Antonio in some of our more riparian areas. And then also they actually nest in the winter, which is pretty interesting. And then I've seen bald eagles in other parts of the county and around. Keep your eyes open for these large eagles around some of our lakes and rivers and things like that. Ospreys, I see ospreys in the winter quite often as well. Go around anybody's bass tank or bass lake, and you might see an osprey. So the bald eagle is the first picture on the top, and then the osprey is the next picture on the right there. And then you can't really get too far about talking about raptors without talking about the crested caracara. Crested caracara is this picture in the bottom middle. If you've looked at birds at all in any of our rural areas, you've probably seen the crested caracara. They are in the falcon family. They're primarily scavengers, and they're very interesting birds, make some really, really interesting sounds. They do have pretty robust feet, but they're not very made for grasping. They're more for walking on the ground. And I'm told that their face can change color based on their mood. I don't know what a pissed off caracara color is, but I probably would like to know before I handled one. Pretty neat critters, but the caracara seems to have expanded its range into farther north than San Antonio. It used to be just kind of a South Texas, Central America species. Now they're all the way up into Central Texas, things like that. They take advantage of a lot of different resources all over. We've seen them all over Bexar County, no doubt. Very interesting in their gregarious nature. And I haven't truly documented it, but I think they're eating peanuts out of peanut fields too, which would be kind of an interesting documentation of a raptor eating a peanut. But you never know. We also have some kites, some different kite species. I used to call it the black-shouldered kite. I think it's now the white-tailed kite, which is the bottom left picture here. In some of our large grass areas, large open fields in South Texas, you can see these white-tailed kites here in the winter, as well as every year in the early fall, I always get tricked by Mississippi kites. Well, I'll see groups of 10 or 15 or 20 Mississippi kites migrating south. And they have a kite has kind of a long, narrow wing. And when I see the first one every early fall, they're kind of some of the earlier migrators, I immediately think falcon. And I get really excited. Oh, maybe that's a peregrine falcon. But they don't get me wrong. Mississippi kites are really cool, but they always kind of trick me a little bit every time I see them. But we'll see those Mississippi kites migrating through into South Texas to Central and South America in the early fall and the early migrants. And there's one other raptor that I haven't mentioned on here. I should have added it. Is the northern harrier. Northern harrier is a bird that we also get here in the wintertime, migrating into our area, spending the winter here in South Texas. The northern harrier is one of those birds that you'll see flying across open grass areas very low to the ground. They'll be 10 feet off the ground, just kind of coursing back and forth across the ground, looking for small prey like mice, lizards, small birds, insects, things like that. The northern harrier in the air can be pretty easy to identify because of that white rump. If you see that white rump and that bird low to the ground, flying very low to the ground, back and forth across these open grassy areas, that's a northern harrier. Where they can trick you is when they don't perch very often, but when they perch, they're pretty weird looking critters. They actually have a facial disc like an owl. And they can actually listen, similar to an owl, use their hearing to try to listen for critters as they're flying along, looking for things to catch in those open fields. All right, so I know I've talked a lot about identifying different birds. Now I kind of want to break into a little bit of birds of prey in kind of an urban setting. Why do we have? This picture I really enjoy. There's 3 Harris's hawks. These are actually falconers birds hunting rabbits in a field that's about to be developed. This was up in the panhandle of Texas, but it just kind of screams to me urban raptors, right? Brand new houses, hawks hunting prey right outside these houses. So why are birds of prey? Are they using our urban settings? Are they doing well? Or are they doing poor? And why are they using our urban settings? And so I kind of want to talk about that a little bit as we change gears. So first off, why are they in our urban settings? Abundant and concentrated prey. We have all kinds of prey species that take advantage of our urban settings. We have lots and lots of grackles, mice and rats, pigeons, rabbits, you name it. We add diversity to our landscape, diversity of structures, and then that's going to attract some of those species. And then we also add water to our landscape that probably hadn't been there before, which is going to attract a lot of these other species as well. So you attract the prey, you're going to attract the predators. Also, lots of excellent hunting perches. We have all of our telephone wires, and I guess not telephone wires, I'm more about power lines, buildings, things like that. Our raptors are going to use all of these perches for hunting locations. And also thinking about Bexar County, for example, or South Texas in general, I like to consider South Texas as a funnel. So Bexar County is kind of at the top of the funnel, whereas the Rio Grande Valley is at the bottom of the funnel. So in our central flyway, all of the bird species are going to migrate from the central and northern US and Canada, and they're going to come right through our funnel on their way to Central and South America. So being in Bexar County, being in San Antonio, you're at the top of that funnel of all the central flyway birds that are going to be coming through, and they're going to be using whatever resources they can on their travels through. And so water features, wildscapes, anything like that, those are, we like to call them the gas stations of the migrating birds. And so the gas stations of the migrating birds are all these food resources and water resources. And then, of course, that attracts the raptors that are going to use that same resource for the little birds that are there. I had someone asking about rodenticides in cities, and don't worry, that's on my list to talk about. I will definitely talk about some rodenticides and things like that. So let's talk about what are some issues or fears or concerns that might be associated with birds of prey in Bexar County? What are some things that I might deal with that landowners or homeowners might call me about, or some things we might want to consider when we think about birds of prey? First off, during nesting season, I'm getting more and more calls about concerns about nesting raptors. In your top left is a great horned owl nest. Owls are actually starting to get nests now. They're already getting territorial. They're going to start nesting now in this early late winter, early spring. And then, of course, we have red-tailed hawks nesting in different parts of our area. And then I get a lot of calls about red-shouldered hawks causing problems in our area. What does that mean? What do I mean by problems? Well, when a hawk when they start to nest and set up a territory, when they are laying eggs, they're putting a lot of resources into that nest, and they're going to defend that nest, defend that resource. So what happens is they build their nests in people's backyards or their front yards or around their area. And certain times those parents might get aggressive, looking at people as a potential predator of their young. So they end up chasing people, bouncing off their heads, things like that. And it generally can be a problem for a lot of people. Me personally, I find it kind of neat. I'd love to have a raptor nest in my yard. Hey, if I can't, if I want to not use my yard as often in the that time of year when they're nesting, I'd be okay with that because I could watch the raptors. But other people might want to garden or play in their backyard, and they're worried about this, large hawk that might be screaming at them and dive bombing them. What can you do? The way the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which protects all of our migratory birds like raptors, reads, the minute that bird has laid an egg, it is illegal to mess with that nest. Okay, so as they're starting to get their territories going, before they make that nest, before they start to egg lay, if you don't want that bird to be nesting in your backyard, maybe putting up streamers or trimming trees or doing other things to make it seem like that's not a good place to nest. Maybe they'll nest somewhere else. That would be the thing to do. But once they've laid that egg, you're going to have to kind of deal with that aggressive raptor going through their life cycle. And then once they're through their life cycle, which is generally a month or two at most, then that aggression goes away and move on down with your life. The other thing I ran into, which I was pretty interested in seeing, was this past year, an actual broad-winged hawk nest in a subdivision outside of Shirts. I don't know if anybody has run into that before, but I didn't expect to run into a broad-winged hawk nest in a subdivision. But these broad-winged hawks were very aggressive and actually had made contact with some people as they were nesting. What I found was if people ran from them, they became more bold. If people weren't afraid of the hawks weren't dive bombing them anymore. I actually was there and I got to see the hawks try to dive bomb me. The minute I turned my back, they would dive bomb me. If I faced them, they wouldn't. But what we had those people do is they carried an umbrella so the hawk would bounce off the umbrella instead of them. And then once the nesting was done, they again talking about, hey, next spring, make sure that they're not happy nesting there anymore. Trim the trees, putting up streamers, things like that to try to keep those raptors from wanting to nest in that subdivision. But I have no doubt I will continue to get calls about aggressive raptors nesting in people's yards. And it's very interesting with red-shouldered hawks. There are probably dozens and dozens of red-shouldered hawk nests in Bexar County. Very few of them become aggressive. I don't know why, but some of them are aggressive. Very few of them are aggressive. Most of them are not. So if you see a raptor nesting or beginning to nest, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be aggressive. But my suggestion to you at this point is let them finish their life cycle, then move on down the road with maybe trying to keep them from wanting to nest there in the future. All right. I saw there was a question about a Chihuahua. Don't worry, I'll get into that here in a little bit as well. Uh, the next thing I'm going to talk about is, and I've gotten this call many times as well. People put up, and I'm talking about to Bear Audubon Society, so I'm sure y'all have run into this before. You put up all your bird feeders. You're excited to see all these different birds, lesser goldfinches, cardinals, different things like that coming to your bird feeder. Well, then this little hawk called a Cooper's hawk decides to turn your bird feeder into a little hunting extravaganza. And now you don't have the birds coming to your feeder anymore. And I've had people get pretty angry over the phone with me over the Cooper's hawk chasing the birds away. Um, well, a bird feeder is a bird feeder. So it's still feeding birds. It's just feeding a different bird. Uh, Recommendations I've made with this situation would be to stop the feeding for a little while, maybe for a few weeks or a month or so, to where that Cooper's hawk doesn't use that as part of its hunting grounds anymore for a while, because a lot of these Cooper's hawks might be migrating through or what have you, or also providing really good shelter, escape cover for the other birds you're interested in near your feeder. Or on the flip side, putting your feeders out in the wide open where the Cooper's hawk has nowhere to ambush from. So if you're got a Cooper's hawk using your bird feeder, it's still a bird feeder. It's just feeding maybe the different type of bird. Nope. Hunting small pets. Let's talk about that. I have gotten this call quite often. Hey, I've got a Chihuahua or I've got a small dog, and that hawk's going to eat my dog. Most of our raptor species, even these large red-tailed hawks, the largest female red-tailed hawk is going to weigh about 3 pounds, 3.5 pounds. Are they capable of capturing a 5-pound Chihuahua and flying over your fence with it? No. That's way too large for them. A 5-pound Chihuahua is pretty small. Could they capture one and eat it? Sure. So if you got a dog that small, I'd probably be a little concerned about it. But if you've got a 15-pound dog or a 20-pound dog or even a 10 or 12-pound dog, there wouldn't be much to be concerned about. They're not going to go after a prey that large. So yeah, 5 pounds and less, maybe something think about. But generally speaking, it's got to be a very, very small dog for a raptor to really go after it. What I do run into a lot is backyard chickens and people having problems with raptors taking their chickens. I don't know if any of y'all have dealt with that here before, but that generally people who raise chickens are very particular about their chickens. And I've had some demands of me taking the hawks away, which I can't do. But recommendations I've given in that respect would be one thing. Most of our problems with raptors occur during migration, which is that fall and spring timeframe. So, hey, if you can pen your chickens up for a certain period of time to where maybe after that migration has passed, maybe it'll be less of a problem. Also providing escape shelter for chickens. I've heard of people actually putting up little umbrellas to where that chicken can run underneath that umbrella or something like that. Also removing the perches that the hawk wants to use, those kinds of things, and also getting larger chickens that might be able to fight off that hawk. I've heard of that before. So when it comes to that, again, birds of prey are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, so you can't remove the hawk. And the problem is, if you removed one hawk, the next hawk's going to come do the same thing. So you have to change what you do to stop the problem. You can't just remove the hawk and then the problem is solved. So that's the best I can tell you about small pets or chickens is modify how you do things to make it less successful for that hawk to capture that chicken or that small dog, something like that. Another one I deal with is roosting of vultures. Get this question quite often in some of our smaller towns around Bear County, and also in some of the water towers and things like that. During the winter time frame, the vultures are going to roost in large numbers. And where's the problem? That's a whole lot of fecal matter, and a lot of people are not happy with that fecal matter. I've actually heard of them roosting on people's large houses as well. What's been done to limit that? Reducing the perching surfaces. to keep them from wanting to roost there. I've heard of people using effigies of vultures. They generally get them from Halloween stores, where you can actually take an effigy of a rooster of a vulture, hang it upside down in that area where they would roost, and it can keep them from wanting to roost there. So if you do have problems with vultures, things like that, those are your options, is try to reduce the perching surfaces, and then maybe either a black trash bag or some kind of effigy of a vulture that you hang upside down in the area. So that's something to do from that perspective. But that's a lot of the calls that I get, is the roosting habits of vultures. Another one we get, and this actually happens a lot in the fall, is raptors being caught in buildings, trapped in buildings. So a lot of our large warehouses, Lowe's, Home Depots, things like that, these very large buildings. Why do you think the raptors are going in there? Well, how many Lowe's or large or warehouses of any kind have you been in that there aren't pigeons, English house sparrows, sometimes grackles, you name it, living in those areas too? Well, these raptors just get drawn into those same buildings that those other little birds are living in. But what happens is the raptor goes in a small opening, and then it flies up to the top, and it can't figure out how to get back out. So what do you do about it? So the easiest thing to do, the simplest and best thing to do, if it's possible, is turn off all the lights in the building, open one door, and leave. The hawk will calm down. It will see the light coming from the one door, and it'll be able to fly its way out. You might be able to put some water down in that opening if the bird's been in there for days at a time, or bird seed to draw in some small birds to eat there, to where that hawk sees that, goes throughout the door. That's your simplest and best way to capture a hawk that is trapped in a large warehouse, a large building. I have heard of falconers that have gone to these buildings and trapped these hawks with different raptor traps that we use, but that's not always your best bet, because you don't know if that person's available to trap it, that kind of thing. So your best bet is to try to get that hawk to find out where the opening is itself and to get out. Finding an injured bird of prey. This is another one that happens pretty often. Based on research, approximately 70% of young raptors don't make it their first year. They don't survive for many reasons. Maybe they just weren't a good hunter. Maybe they had an injury, who knows what. So a lot of them don't make it, and a lot of them end up getting injured or sick and found on the side of the road or somewhere else. So the biggest thing I can say is, most instances, especially in the rural areas, the best thing to do, and I know this is hard, but is to let nature take its course, right? To allow things to happen, because that's pretty normal. But if you are concerned, especially if it's a large raptor like a bald eagle or something like that, in San Antonio area, we have a wonderful raptor specialized rehabilitation facility called Last Chance Forever. Those guys are experts at what they do, and they can give advice on how to corral that raptor and get it to that rehab facility. Unfortunately, a lot of raptors can have, just because it looks healthy, otherwise, a lot of times they have a lot of problems like broken wings or things like that. But that can be your option, is to reach out to Last Chance Forever about getting that raptor to a rehabilitator to be evaluated on whether it could be brought back to health and released. What about dangers to birds of prey in our urban settings? Do you think it's pretty dangerous for birds of prey to be in, say, San Antonio, for example? Compared to rural areas, probably. I would say it's probably pretty dangerous. But because of all the resources available that are in our cities, they're going to continue to use our cities and probably do very well. A lot of these raptor species are doing very well in our urban areas. One of the big ones is electrocution. Power poles all over. Most power companies are required to protect their power poles from raptors getting electrocuted. If you find a power pole that has a raptor gets electrocuted on, you can call that power company, and they're supposed to go fix that power pole so that won't electrocute other raptors. That's pretty important. collisions with buildings, cars, power lines. Yeah, that's a big one. I would say if you're on social media in any way, Facebook, what have you, any kind of bird things, especially in the fall, you'll hear of someone hearing a big thud on their door and seeing a small bird, or I mean, sorry, thud on their window, a small bird laying on the ground with a Cooper's hawk laying next to it, both slammed headfirst into that window. Lots and lots of collisions occur with buildings, with cars, you name it in that process. Cars are a big one. A lot of owls at night. They're going to be feeding on the roadsides because there's a lot of rodents going up and down across the roads. And so the owls get hit by cars quite often. And then power lines and fences are also really big hazards. In the wild, a thin tree branch is something that a raptor probably isn't going to worry about. But a power line is thin and it isn't going to break or give like a tree branch would. So these raptors didn't evolve with these with these power lines or fences. And so you do see a lot of birds hitting power lines and fences and getting injured or killed that way, for sure. And then poison. Someone asked about rodenticides. So think of all the chemicals and different things that happen in cities and how that can get into the environment and get into the food chain of different animals. Raptors are at the top of the food chain, so they're going to be impacted by all kinds of these poisons and things we use. Rodenticides is a big one that's a big deal now. Nobody likes rats and mice around their houses, so they'll put out different poisons. Those rats eat those poisons, and then the hawks or falcons or what have you eat those rats and mice, and they get build up the rodenticides in their system and it can kill them. So it's a big deal that we're learning about quite a bit. Most of these pesticides that we use for mice and rats are pretty nasty things. And we don't really understand the implications of the animal kingdom with these different poisons and things that we use. So from my perspective, I'm not a big fan of them. I'd rather let the owls and the hawks and coyotes and foxes eat all the mice and the rats and do that instead of dealing with the poisons and stuff like that. But I think we're going to continue to learn more and more about these poisons and how they're affecting the ecosystems, and maybe some things will change over time. All right. Well, I'm told that I'm close to an hour, so I've talked quite a bit. Didn't realize I was going to talk that long. I apologize. I guess that's a subject that I really like. But the last thing I'll go a little bit into is falconry. I've been a falconer for 22 years. I think it's 22 years since I was 16 years old. It's a passion of mine. Falconry is the hunting of game with a trained raptor. That's what it is. Myself, for the last 13 years, I've been hunting ducks with falcons. It's a pretty neat sport. I'd love to talk to y'all more about it, about how it works. What draws me to it is, one, the interest in wildlife and the interest in habitats, and then also just the ability to interact with a wild animal. But with that, since I've gone as long as I have gone, I think I will table the falconry discussion for another time and then finish up with a happy to answer questions. Would you like me to stop sharing my screen, or we can keep that up?
Let me just put here the gallery view. Yeah. Anybody, let me just, there was a couple of things. The first question I wanted to ask is, someone asked if you would give them your email. They have a picture of a hawk they'd like you to help them identify. Are you free to do that?
Yep, I will put that in the message. I'll put my email in the message right now.
Okay, and for those of you who are watching, when you get the link to the recording, you will also get a link to the chat with all the questions and comments and Matt's email. So, and then the next thing I was going to say is Becca Taylor, who is our program chair, is already seconding my motion here. We'd love to have you come back and talk about falconry. And Matt and I were talking before everybody else came in. This is some of the benefits of running the Zoom. I get to talk to people before. That perhaps if we were interested, that we could actually, when we can have face-to-face meetings again, like in the field, we could go out hunting with him. Hunt the ducks with his, I believe, a prairie falcon and a peregrine falcon that he uses. And we have already talked that maybe the next February, a year from now, when we feel safe from the COVID, and also it's hunting season, the shooting season's in the 31st of January. And then there's 2 weeks that only falconers can go out. I thought that was really cool. Do you have to have a duck stamp to do that?
Of course.
Okay, so we sell them at Bexar Audubon every year. So if you need one, we can fix you up. So we'll maybe we can have a little program on falconry and do it in the field. Those people, but be aware that there is hunting involved. So if you're not comfortable with that, you have to think about it. But it's the bird doing its natural behaviors just according to command by a falconer or stimulation, whatever it is that the falconer does. I'm not quite sure. Okay, other things. Here, this is, I don't use poison on rodents in my garage. Just put peppermint oil on cotton balls and scatter them around the garage and the rodents leaves. Really works. Well, that certainly wouldn't hurt anything. I don't think raptors would eat raw.
What about silverfish?
No.
Let's see. Thank you for mentioning Last Chance Forever. They are wonderful, and they support birding of all kinds. They take vultures, and wildlife rescue and rehabilitation also takes any kind of birds. But the raptors really should go to Last Chance Forever.
Yep.
Let's see. Okay, anybody else have a question? Here's a question that from Hidalgo County. My husband's walking in Estarillano Grande Park today, saw a rather large hawk among a bunch of ducks that erupted from the water. It had a white patch under the tail.
Probably I would bet down there it'd be a Harris's hawk.
Harris's hawk, yeah. They hunt ducks, I know that.
Oh, yes.
So that's really cool to have that input from Hidalgo County. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Let's just see, make sure we didn't leave anything out. If anybody has any other questions, you can unmute your microphone and ask them by, without having to type. We said our Cooper's hawks here all year, and yes, but probably in fewer numbers.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know how many nests we actually have of Cooper's hawks. It's an interest of mine to see other cities are getting more and more nests. I wonder if we'll get the same in San Antonio.
Yeah, another, Tom's whispering in my ear here that you can go on eBird and search for Cooper's hawk, and they will show you a little map of when they're most common and when you get the most.
Did the graph of Bear County.
They do a graph, and you do Bear County, you can also see when they're here. So that's a really good resource too. Okay. Any other questions? Well, that is fabulous. We wish we could stay here all night and talk about these things. We've had 100 people come tonight, and that is one of the highest numbers we've had in a long time. So you can see the interest there. You're a wonderful presenter. We thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to being out in the field with you and your hawks or your falcons next year. So we're going to sign you up and
Sounds
on
good.
the calendar, and we'll all look forward to that. So everyone, thanks for everyone who attended tonight. And if you have any questions afterwards, did I see your email in there?
I did put it up there somewhere.
Did you send it just to me, or did you send it to everyone?
I did to everyone.
Did you do return?
Oh, here it is. Matthew.Reidy, Reidy, at tpwd.texas.gov. It is in there. So when you get your link, which will be on the bearaudubon.org website in a few days, couple of days. Give us a couple of days to get the recording and get it posted. It will be a link to a folder with the chat and the recording of the meeting. And you can look at those pictures as long as you want. And I'm sure if you have other questions, Matt would be happy to answer them. Usually right after we sign off, we think of the question we should have asked. So Matt, thank you so much. It's been a real
Thank you.
pleasure. And thanks to everybody, wherever you were sitting tonight. So everybody have a good, everybody go, yay, like that. Okay, so thanks, and we'll see you at some of these other events. Just go to bearaudubon.org to get all the details. Nighty night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.